Della Norwood had no idea that renting a weathered cottage by the sea would drop her right next to the man who would flip her entire world upside down. She dragged the last suitcase up the narrow porch steps, her boots crunching against the gravel path. The salty breeze whipped her chestnut hair across her face as she pulled the key from the envelope left on the cracked wood table by the door. The cottage was quaint, old, and definitely not the luxury she'd grown up dreaming about, but it was hers for the summer, and that meant freedom. A break. A chance to figure out what came next after losing her job, her apartment, and just for fun her cheating ex all in the same month. She pushed the door open, and the scent of lemon, oil, and old wood greeted her. The ocean view from the kitchen window took her breath away. The crashing waves, the cliffs, the endless sky, it all felt like something out of a movie. Maybe you're not failing, she whispered to herself. Maybe you're just starting over. She unpacked the essentials, made bad coffee in the worst coffee maker, and by late afternoon she was ready to go for a walk along the dunes. The air was crisp and clean, and the beach was almost empty except for the massive, modern glass house perched one cliff over, where a sleek black car was parked in the long driveway. She paused, squinting. A man stood on the balcony, shirtless, holding a coffee mug like he belonged in a cologne ad. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and an unreadable expression. He didn't wave, just looked at her. For a second too long, Della looked away fast and kept walking. "Okay, neighbor." "Weirdo," she muttered under her breath, cheeks warm. She didn't know that man was Maddox Callahan, billionaire CEO of Callahan Ventures, who'd made his fortune in tech before 30 and then disappeared from the public eye. She didn't know he'd been watching the cottage all week, annoyed that someone had rented it after it had been empty for years. And she definitely didn't know he'd find himself walking the beach the next morning just to accidentally run into her. Della didn't expect to see him again. But there he was, coming up the beach barefoot, in a fitted white tee and linen pants like some kind of coastal god. "You're staying in the cottage?" he asked, his voice low and even. She blinked. Yeah, I rented it for the summer." He raised an eyebrow. "You're not a writer or something, are you?" "Nope," she said. "Used to work in marketing, now I just exist. And drink bad coffee." Something flickered in his face. "You're brave to stay there, that place leaks when it rains." "Well," she shrugged, "then I'll buy a bucket." He let out a short laugh. "Maddox," he said, offering a hand. Della. They shook hands. His grip was warm, firm. "Nice to meet you, Della," he said, eyes lingering on her face for a beat too long. She gave a polite smile. "Nice house, by the way." "Thanks, I built it a few years ago." "Wow, you design houses?" He hesitated. "Something like that." She didn't press, and he didn't offer anything else. So they parted ways. But that wouldn't be the last time she saw him. By the end of the week, they'd run into each other 4 more times. Once at the local coffee shop where he quietly paid for her drink. Once while she was struggling to carry groceries up the cottage steps, he took the bags from her without a word and carried them inside. Another time, she caught him walking back from the beach with wet hair and a surfboard under one arm. "You surf?" she asked, surprised. "Helps clear my head." "You have a lot on your mind." He didn't answer, just looked at her for a moment before nodding once and walking away. He was quiet, mysterious. Rich, clearly, but not flashy. His house was beautiful but hidden, his car was sleek but not showy. And he never mentioned what he did for work or why he was always alone, and yet he kept showing up, helping her, watching her. Listening. One rainy evening, the power went out. Della lit the only candle she had and curled up on the couch with a blanket, trying not to think about how loud the storm had gotten. The roof creaked. The wind howled. Water dripped somewhere in the corner. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find Maddox standing there, soaked through, holding a flashlight. "Power's out across the coast," he said. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You sure? You're shaking. It's just cold." He looked past her into the dark cottage. "Come stay at my place tonight." She blinked. "What? I've got backup power, heat, dry clothes. You can't stay in here like this." She hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not." It was the way he said it, calm, steady, like he wasn't asking for company, he was making sure she was safe. She nodded. His house was warm, clean, minimalist and sleek, with ocean views in every room. A fire already crackled in the living room as she wrapped herself in a dry towel and took in the space. "Do you always rescue women during storms?" she asked, teasing. "Only the ones who rent ancient cottages with leaky roofs." She laughed, and it felt good. Too good. She looked up at him, realizing how close they were standing. His eyes were darker in the firelight. He didn't lean in, didn't touch her, just said, "You can take the guest room upstairs. I'll be in the office if you need anything." She nodded, heart fluttering. "Thanks, Maddox." He held her gaze. "Sleep well, Della." She didn't sleep, not really. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why a man like him was alone in a house like this. Why he kept appearing in her life. Why he looked at her like he wanted to say something but always stopped himself. And more than anything, she wondered what would happen when the storm passed. She had no idea that by the end of the summer, she wouldn't just know his secrets, she'd be the woman he couldn't live without. The rain had stopped by morning, but the fog clung to the cliffs like a secret. Della stepped barefoot onto the smooth hardwood floors of Maddox's guest room, her hair still damp from the night before. She hadn't heard him moving around, but the faint scent of coffee told her he was somewhere in the house. She found him in the open kitchen, pouring a second cup and reading from a tablet. For a moment, she just watched him. The way he stood calm, unreadable, like the storm hadn't happened at all. Like inviting a near stranger to sleep under his roof was the most natural thing in the world. "Morning," she said, her voice rough with sleep. He looked up, nodded once. "Hope the guest bed wasn't too stiff." It was perfect, better than listening to the wind try to rip the roof off. He slid the mug across the island toward her. "You take cream?" "No." "Black's fine." She took a sip, watching him over the rim. There was something deliberate about the way he moved, like he was constantly managing 1,000 thoughts behind his eyes. Calm on the surface, but never still. She set the cup down. "You always this generous with people you barely know?" He didn't look at her. "I don't usually have to be, but you made an exception. I wasn't about to let you freeze in a waterlogged antique." Della narrowed her eyes. "You talk like someone who's used to fixing things." For the first time, he smiled barely. "I prefer to prevent them from breaking in the first place." She leaned against the counter, curious. "So what exactly do you do, Maddox?" "You keep dodging the question." His fingers paused on the tablet, then set it down completely. "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "Private equity." She raised a brow. "That sounds vague on purpose." "It is." He met her gaze evenly. No apology, no elaboration. She gave a soft laugh. "You're very good at not answering questions. You're very good at asking them." They stood there for a beat too long, and Della felt something pull tight between them again, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. "I should probably get back to the cottage," she said, breaking the silence. "I'll walk you. I think I can handle it, I know. I'm just heading that way." She didn't argue. Outside, the path was slick but manageable. The storm had scattered driftwood and seaweed across the sand, and the sky was still low and gray. They walked without speaking, the sound of the waves filling the space between them. At the cottage door, she turned. "Thank you for everything." He gave a single nod. "If it leaks again, don't wait for thunder to call me." "I won't." But he didn't leave. Instead, his eyes scanned the roofline, then the porch supports, like he was cataloging every weakness. "You ever think about fixing this place up?" he asked. "I don't own it." "If you did," she shrugged, "I'd probably start with the floorboards. They creak like ghosts." He said nothing, but she noticed the way his expression shifted, thoughtful, calculating. "You're really into repairs, huh?" she asked. "Let's just say I don't like watching things fall apart." She opened the door, stepping inside. "Well, thanks again for the coffee. And the dry towels, and the not letting me get hypothermia." He gave her one last look. "You're welcome, Della." Then he walked back down the path without another word. The next 2 days passed without seeing him. Della buried herself in a freelance project. She'd been putting off something small for a local eco brand that barely paid in coffee money, but kept her busy. She told herself she wasn't thinking about Maddox, but every time she glanced at the cliffs, every time she passed the glass-walled house, she felt that pull again, that curiosity, that tension. So when she found a handwritten note stuck to her door on the third morning, she froze. It was short. No greeting, just 3 lines, driveways being repaved, don't park past the pine post, stop by tonight if you want a real dinner. She stared at the paper for a long time before tucking it into the drawer next to the sink. By 7, her curiosity won out. She wore the only decent outfit. She'd packed a navy wrap blouse and black jeans that she hoped didn't scream, "I haven't done laundry in a week." Her heart thudded louder with every step across the gravel path leading to his front door. Before she could knock, it swung open. He stood there wearing a dark button-down, sleeves rolled. No tie, no pretense, just him and the faint smell of something incredible roasting in the kitchen. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either." He stepped aside, letting her in. The dining table was set for 2. Real silverware, linen napkins. A bottle of something expensive already breathing beside 2 crystal glasses. It wasn't flashy, just intentional, intimate. "You cooked?" she asked. "I try not to poison people on purpose." She laughed, easing into the seat he pulled out for her. "That's reassuring." They ate roasted lamb with harissa glaze, grilled asparagus, and saffron rice. Every bite was better than the last. As the sun vanished behind the cliffs, the house glowed with warm light and quiet music. Della found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. "So," she said, between sips of wine, "if you're not going to tell me what kind of company you really run, can you at least tell me why you live all the way out here?" He turned his glass slowly. "I needed space." "From what? People, expectations, noise." She leaned in. "That's the vaguest answer yet." He smiled faintly. "I used to live in the city, high-rise, drivers, constant meetings. I made a lot of money very fast, and one day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually looked at the sky." She studied him. "So you escaped?" "I bought this land before I ever needed it, built the house myself." "You designed it," he nodded, "so you're good at more than just fixing leaky roofs." "I like building things that last." Della set her fork down. "You don't talk like someone who's running from the world." "I'm not. I'm just choosing which parts I let in." She didn't respond, didn't need to. The air between them was thick with something unspoken again. When he rose to pour more wine, she looked up at him. "So what part of the world are you letting in tonight?" He paused, glass in hand. The words hit harder than she expected. She swallowed. "That's dangerous." "I know." He sat down again, closer this time. Outside, the wind had picked up again. But inside, the silence wrapped around them like the firelight. Neither of them moved. Neither of them needed to, whatever this was. It had begun. The next morning, Della found a bouquet of wildflowers resting against her front door. No note. Just a delicate bundle tied with twine, still damp with dew. She stood barefoot on the porch, blinking at it like it had materialized from the mist. The petals were wind-blown and imperfect, clearly gathered by hand. She brought them inside without questioning where they came from because she already knew. She set them in the only vase she could find, a tall mason jar, and tried to focus on her laptop. But her fingers hovered uselessly above the keyboard. Thoughts of Maddox kept pressing in, quiet, intense, and impossible to ignore. When she finally gave up trying to work, she walked along the cliff path, hoping the sea air would clear her head. Halfway to the edge, she noticed Maddox kneeling beside a weathered fence post. He was dressed in a slate gray Henley, sleeves rolled, forearms streaked with wood dust. A toolbox sat open beside him. "You're rebuilding the fence now?" she asked, approaching. The coastal wind snapped one of the supports. She stepped closer. "You really don't sit still, do you?" "I like when things stay upright." She watched him slot a new board into place. "You ever think you're trying too hard to hold up things that are meant to fall?" He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes I wish I didn't know how things were built." She sat on the dry grass. That sounds lonely. It is. The wind lifted her hair as they sat in silence. Below them, the tide rolled in slow and heavy, brushing the shore like a secret it couldn't keep. "You always this honest with people you barely know?" she asked. "I don't know what you are to me yet." That pulled her eyes to his. "I didn't mean to get involved," he said, "but you're here, and now I can't seem to look away," she swallowed. "What happens if you do?" His voice was low. "I don't want to." The ocean roared beneath them, but the silence between their words said more than the waves ever could. Later that afternoon, she found herself pacing her tiny kitchen, trying to shake the weight of their conversation. The way he said he didn't want to look away, it wasn't flirtation. It was something heavier, something dangerous and real. That night, she didn't sleep. Not because of the storm, there wasn't one, but because her thoughts wouldn't quiet. At some point, she gave up trying and stepped outside. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the cliffs. She walked the path barefoot, drawn by instinct more than logic. She found him on the balcony of his house, leaning against the railing, a glass in hand. He didn't look surprised to see her. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." She joined him at the edge, their shoulders nearly touching. The sea looked darker at night, endless and unknowable. He handed her the glass. "What is it?" she asked. "Barolo, from Italy." She took a sip. It was rich, earthy, and far too elegant for a midnight meeting in bare feet. "Why are you really here, Maddox?" she asked, setting the glass down. "I told you, I built this place to get away." "That's not what I meant. Why are you still here?" "Why not go back to the city, to your company, your boardrooms?" He clenched the railing, knuckles pale. "Because I made a mistake, a big one. I trusted the wrong person. I gave up control, and it nearly destroyed everything I built." She didn't interrupt. "I stepped down temporarily. Let someone else run things while I cleaned up what was left, but the mess was bigger than I thought. And now, I'm not sure who I am if I'm not fixing things." She turned to him. "Maybe you don't have to be anything other than someone who's still figuring it out." He looked at her, then really looked, like she'd said something he hadn't realized he needed to hear. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said. "You're not." "I don't do casual, Della, neither do I." The silence stretched again, but this time it was electric. He reached out, brushing her hair back from her face. Slow, gentle. "You scare me," he said. "Good," she whispered. "Because you scare me too." He kissed her then. There was no hesitation, no teasing. Just the inevitable crash of two people who'd been circling too long. His hands framed her face like she was something fragile, and her fingers gripped the front of his shirt like she needed to hold on to something real. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "I wasn't looking for any of this," she whispered. "Neither was I." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence and moonlight, until the sky began to lighten at the edges. She never asked him to define what was happening between them, and he never offered. But the next day, a luxury SUV pulled into the driveway of the cottage with a delivery. A new stovetop, still in its packaging, and a note that said, "For your coffee. And your mornings." She stared at it in disbelief, hands pressed to her mouth. She didn't know what scared her more, that he kept giving her pieces of his world, or that she was starting to want them. The morning sun spilled across the hardwood floors of the cottage, casting sharp angles through the windows. Della stood at the new stovetop, stirring a pan of scrambled eggs, still unused to how evenly the burners heated. She hadn't asked for it. Maddox hadn't waited for permission. It was just there, like the wildflowers, like the dinners, like the way he looked at her now. Not like a man interested in passing time, but like someone building something he wasn't ready to name. She plated the eggs and sat at the little table by the window, watching the tide roll out. Her phone buzzed. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Della Norwood," a woman asked, her voice clipped and crisp, speaking. "This is Teresa Langley. I'm reaching out on behalf of the Greywater Foundation. We'd like to speak with you regarding a potential opportunity. Are you available this afternoon?" Della's heart skipped. The Greywater Foundation was one of the most prestigious sustainable development organizations in the country. She'd applied for a project lead role months ago and heard nothing back. She cleared her throat. Yes, I can make time today. Excellent. We'll send a car. When the call ended, she stared at the wall, stunned. She hadn't told Maddox she'd applied for that job. She hadn't told anyone. It was the one sliver of ambition she hadn't let go of, even when everything else had fallen apart. But now that it was real, she didn't know what to do with the rush of adrenaline or what it meant for the life she was quietly building here. By 4 o'clock, she was in a sleek electric sedan, heading inland toward the Foundation's regional office. The meeting was brief but promising. They wanted her to consult on a new ocean conservation initiative starting in 2 weeks. Full-time. Relocation required. When she returned that evening, the sky was turning lavender. She walked the path to Maddox's house without thinking. The front door was open, music drifting from inside, something low and melodic, piano-heavy. She stepped in and found him in the kitchen, barefoot, rolling out dough on the counter. "You bake now?" she asked, dropping her bag near the door. His hands didn't pause. "Flatbread." "Thought I'd try a new recipe." She set her keys down, watching him. "I got a job offer." He looked up immediately, no smile, just quiet attention. "It's with the Greywater Foundation. I applied months ago. Didn't think I had a shot." He wiped flour from his hands. "What's the role?" "Lead strategist on a marine initiative off the coast of Maine." "It's exactly the kind of work I always wanted to do. It's just far." He nodded, slow. "When would you go?" 2 weeks. He turned back to the counter, picked up the dough again. Maddox. He didn't look at her. "Congratulations, Della. That's all you have to say. I'm proud of you." "That's not what I asked." He set the dough aside, resting both palms against the edge of the counter. His voice dropped. "I want you to take it." Her stomach twisted. "You don't even want to talk about it." He turned then, eyes unreadable. "What do you want me to say? That I'll beg you to stay? That I'll throw money at you until you forget about your dreams?" "No, I want you to say how you feel. I want to know if this whatever we've been doing means something to you." His jaw tightened. "It does." "Then say it." He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "I didn't plan for you, Della. I didn't think I could feel anything like this again. I built this house to keep the world out. But you walked in and made it feel like a home." Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. He kept going. "I don't want you to leave, but I also won't be the reason you don't chase what you've worked for. That's not love, that's control." She blinked. "You think you love me?" He reached for her hand. "I know I do." Her throat tightened. "Then come with me." The words hung between them, raw and reckless. He froze. "I can't." "Why not?" "I'm still cleaning up the mess I left behind. There's a board meeting in 3 weeks. I have to take back control of my company. There's litigation, false filings, things only I can fix." She pulled her hand back. "So you'll fix everything except us? That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she said, voice rising. "You're always fixing, always building, but when it comes to staying, to choosing someone, you run." He stepped back, and the space between them felt colder than the ocean outside. "I'm not running," he said. "I'm trying to finish what I started. And I'm trying to start something new," she whispered. Silence. He didn't stop her when she walked out. The next week passed in a blur. She packed slowly, deliberately. She sent her acceptance to the Foundation and looked at flights. Maddox didn't come by. No notes, no flowers, just silence. Then, the morning before her departure, she found an envelope at her door. Inside was a deed, not to his house, to the cottage, signed over to her. She stared at it for a long time before noticing the second sheet. In Maddox's handwriting, "In case you ever want to come back or stay." She pressed the paper to her chest, breath shaking. That night, as the taxi waited outside, she stood on the porch with her suitcase and looked once more toward the cliffs. She didn't expect to see him, but he was there. Walking fast, dressed in a black coat, face taut, breath visible in the cold air, she didn't move. He stopped just feet from her, words pouring out before she could speak. "I turned it down." Her brows drew together. "Turned what down?" "The board, the company." "I gave up control." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "I sold my shares to someone I trust. I'm still on the board, but I won't run it anymore. I realized something." What? That I don't want a life I have to escape from, I want one I can live fully. With you, tears blurred her vision. I don't need a title, he said. I don't need to rebuild a $1 billion empire, I need you. She dropped her bag and crossed the distance between them. You're sure? I've never been more certain, he kissed her then, not like before. This one was weightless and anchoring all at once. Final and beginning. A promise, not a question. Later, he helped her unload her suitcase back inside the cottage. She didn't need the flight, not anymore. She had everything she needed right there beneath the wide sky, beside the endless sea with the man who had stopped running and finally stayed. The cottage looked different with Maddox inside it. He didn't belong to its uneven floorboards or mismatched cabinets, but somehow he made it feel more complete. He stood by the window, sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding a mug she hadn't seen before, sleek, matte black, clearly his. His presence had a quiet weight to it, like the tide pulling steady beneath the surface. Della tossed her keys on the counter and slipped her sandals off. The air inside was warm, filled with the scent of fresh herbs from the basil plant she'd been keeping alive with uneven success. So, she said, leaning against the fridge, you really did it, Maddox nodded. Signed the final documents this morning, it's official. And you're okay? No, he said. I'm better than okay, she crossed her arms. You're sure this wasn't just about me? He met her gaze. It started because of you, but I stayed in it because of me. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. I kept telling myself that leadership meant control, that letting go would mean failure. But the truth is, I was afraid to let anyone see the cracks. I've seen them, she said. You're still standing. His expression shifted, softer now. I want to build something that doesn't collapse under pressure, something that doesn't depend on quarterly reports or shareholder moods. She tilted her chin. Like what? Like a life, with you in it. Her pulse jumped. That's a lot of cement and nails. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, gentle but certain. I'm not afraid of the work. She closed her eyes for a moment. Neither am I. They spent the afternoon sorting through the clutter that had collected in the cottage over the years. Maddox pulled out every drawer, checked the plumbing, and even replaced the faulty porch light with one he brought over from his own storage. Della found 2 photo albums buried in a cabinet and spent an hour flipping through them while he worked, pointing out yellowed photos of the original owners dancing on the beach in the 50s. This place has history, she said, holding up a picture of a woman in a polka dot dress grinning beside an old fishing boat. Then we'll add our own, Maddox replied, tightening a bolt beneath the sink. Later, they walked into town together for dinner. Not to the usual cafe where they'd shared awkward glances and careful conversation, but to a small, tucked-away bistro 2 blocks from the coast. The owner greeted Maddox by name and led them to a table on the terrace, overlooking the water. Della raised an eyebrow. You've been holding out on me. I haven't had anyone to bring here, not until now. They talked over fresh seafood and wine, about everything they hadn't made time for before. She told him about her childhood obsession with marine biology, how she almost became a biologist until she realized she hated microscopes. He told her about his first failed company at 22, how he'd slept in his office for 6 months and ate nothing but instant noodles until he sold his second app to a global firm for 7 figures. When dessert came, he reached across the table and laced their fingers together. I've been thinking, he said, that sounds dangerous. I want to restore the cottage, not just patch it, really restore it, she blinked. Why? Because it's ours now, and because I want to build something with you. This place, it gave us a beginning. Let's make it a home. She stared at him, heart full. You're serious? I've already called the architect. I want your input on every detail. Her eyes burned. You're not afraid it'll fall apart? Not with you holding the other end of the beam. Back at the cottage, they sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars emerge one by one like tiny promises. The wind was soft, the night warm enough to keep the door open. I still can't believe any of this happened, she said quietly. You mean us? I mean all of it, losing everything, landing here, meeting you, it doesn't feel real. He turned to her, brushing her hair back. It's the most real thing I've ever known. She leaned into his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Do you think we found this place or it found us? Doesn't matter, he said. What matters is that we're here. A week later, they hosted their first gathering in the newly cleared backyard. Nothing extravagant, just a few neighbors, folding chairs, string lights, and grilled corn. Maddox grilled barefoot, laughing with the elderly couple from 2 doors down, while Della passed out lemonade and explained their restoration plans. People smiled, told them they were glad the place had life in it again. That night, after everyone left, Maddox pulled her into the center of the yard and held her close, swaying to music only they could hear. I've never been this happy, he said, his voice low in her ear. She tightened her arms around him. Then let's stay here, exactly like this. As long as we can. He pulled back just enough to kiss her, slow and certain. Forever sounds good to me. The following month, they began the renovation. Every morning started with coffee on the porch, blueprints spread between them, laughter echoing through the beams. Maddox insisted on doing as much of the work himself as possible. Della, now working remotely with the foundation, balanced her time between project calls and choosing tile samples. They argued once over the color of the kitchen cabinets, but made up before sunset with paint on their noses and kisses in the hallway. By the time the last nail was in place, the cottage was no longer a temporary escape. It was a home one built with intention, with patience, and with a love that had grown from the cracks of 2 broken paths converging. 6 months later, on a warm September evening, Maddox led Della to the edge of the cliff behind the house. The sky blazed gold and rose, and the sea stretched out like a mirror of the heavens. She laughed when she saw the set up a table for 2, candles, and a bottle of wine. You did all this. I had help from the neighbors. They're quite invested in our love story. She turned to him, smiling. You're ridiculous. He dropped to one knee, her breath caught. I don't have a speech, he said. Just this being with you isn't something I ever imagined, but it's the only thing I want for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? She knelt too, eyes shining. Only if we put those blue cabinets in the next house. He laughed, slipping the ring onto her finger. Deal. They kissed as the sun dipped behind the horizon, sealing the start of the rest of their lives. And in that quiet, golden light, surrounded by the home they'd built together, Della, Norwood, and Maddox Callahan finally had everything they never knew they needed: a life, a love, a forever.